Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Huntingdon District Council Development Management Committee meeting. I would like to make you aware that this meeting is being live streamed via the Council's YouTube channel. Please ensure that any mobile phones are switched to silent. So welcome to those who are watching at home. I would also like to outline some housekeeping arrangements. If you wish to speak, please indicate to do so to myself. To enable your microphone, please press the middle button, which will turn green, and the microphone will light up red at the top to indicate that this has happened. Please remember to press the middle button when you have finished speaking, as it is particularly important that all members use their microphone so that the audio can be picked up through the live stream. In the event of a fire alarm sounding during the meeting, please stand and follow the meeting administrator to the evacuation point outside of the building. Firstly, do we have any apologies for absence?
We have apologies from councillors Dew, Mockbull and Tevlin, Chair.
Thank you very much. We will move on to item 1 on the agenda, which is to approve the minutes of the last meeting held on the 20th and the 22nd of May. Do we all agree that these minutes are a correct record of the meeting?
Sorry, I weren't present at the meeting on the 22nd. I weren't elected till after.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. We will move on to item 2, which is members' interest. Are there any members that wish to declare an interest in any items? Councillor Brereton.
Thank you, Chair. Item 3B, the Bury development. Thank you.
Is that because you're the ward member?
Yes, it's my ward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark? 3B, and you're a ward member. Thank you. Councillor Corney?
Same ward.
Thank you. And Councillor Slade?
Item 3C, I'm a ward councillor and on the planning committee, so I'll be stepping out the room for that one.
Thank you. And Councillor Pitt?
Thank you, Chair. It's exactly the same. So 3C, I'm ward councillor and on the planning committee at Town Council. So I'll be stepping out.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we will move on to item 3A on the agenda. Officers have requested to withdraw this particular application due to further consideration of flood risks. So are we happy to withdraw this item from the agenda? Thank you. So we will move on to item 3B. So item 3B is an application for housings off Tucker Lane in Bury, and it will be introduced by our planning officer, Lewis Tomlinson.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. So the site is land off Tunkers Lane, Bury. All reserve matters for the erection of 87 dwellings, along with landscape, scale, layout and appearance, and all ancillary works. So you've got the application site in front of you, outlined in black, about 3.6 hectares. Lies to the south and east of what is currently the built-up area of Bury. It's bounded by a residential development on 3 sides, with the open countryside to the rear. The site is currently agricultural land in flood zone 1. The boundaries of the site are marked by mature hedge planting, and the site is allocated in the local plan for 90 homes. It's just an aerial image. So you can see, sorry if I just go back. So you can see just down to the right-hand side. I can't, for some reason, the mouse isn't there. But to the right-hand side, you can see Berryfield, which is a recent development, a Royal Exception site. So outline planning permission was granted for 87 dwellings, including access and also improvements to Tunkers Lane through widening works. Section 106 agreement secured 40% affordable housing, green and open space, off-site biodiversity enhancement, formal place space contribution, green space maintenance, and wheeled bins. You can see the parameter plan that was approved just on the right-hand side. So this application seeks the approval of the reserve matters for appearance, layout, scale, and landscaping. This application is being considered by members as the officer recommendation is contrary to the Parish Council recommendation of refusal. So you can just see there is the proposed site plan on the left and the parameter plan. It pretty much follows it. It has deviated slightly, but this is resulted in improvements to the design. And this is the proposed site plan and the recently constructed Royal Exception site adjacent. So you can just see them in the context of each other. Layout and form of the sites follow the parameter plan. It's been subject to pre-application discussions involving the urban design team. The layout comprises of a main spine road, with simple spurs coming off. Footpaths are positioned in the majority of areas and abut the central spine, and parking has been sited to the side of houses to reduce prominence, with minimal parking fronting onto the public open space. The proposed frontage onto Tunkers Lane has been designed carefully to ensure there's an active frontage, but also set back from the road. So I'll just quickly run through some of the plans. So you can see these are the dwellings that front onto Tunkers Lane. So I'll just go through these so you can just get an idea of what the street scene would look like. And then that's the apartment block, which is a good focal point towards the attenuation pond and looking from Berryfield sites. So that's just an idea of the design of the dwellings in the scheme. And that's just, that plan again. So in terms of why it's at committee, so the Parish Council has raised concerns on 2 grounds. The applicant did not engage with the Parish Council prior to changing the housing mix to 100% affordable housing, and also the concern regarding the overflow of excess service water. In terms of affordable housing units, it's not a material consideration for this application. The outline plan permission secured 40%. Therefore, what the applicant wishes to do with the remaining 60% of the dwellings on site is up to them. In terms of when we're looking at this is policy compliant, therefore we've not given any weight to that additional affordable housing. It just falls back to what the legal agreement secured at the outline, which is 40%, which is policy compliant. In terms of flooding, members should be aware that a response has been received from the middle level commissioners that state the board's receiving watercourse, Berry Brook, is at capacity during high rainfall events, and the middle level commissioners will not allow any discharge from developments in this area greater than greenfield rates. Submitted information demonstrates surface water proposed development can be managed through the use of permeable paving and attenuation ponds, and that ensures that the discharge is reduced to the 1 in 1 year greenfield runoff rate into the reinstated ditch north of the Berryfield site. So just on the screen in front of you, so the red circle is the attenuation ponds, the red arrows is the reinstated ditch to the north of the Berryfield development. Both Anglian Water, the Lead Local Flood Authority support the proposal. I'll just show you this. So this is just a zoomed in plan of that reinstated ditch. And then this is just for context. So if I can actually get the mouse. So you can see, well, for some reason the mouse isn't working, but the blue line, which is quite obvious on the right-hand image, is Berry Brook. So eventually the water does discharge into that, but it's the main focus is into that reinstated ditch, which Lead Local Flood Authority support and has assessed. So to summarise, the applicant has engaged in a positive manner with officers and consultees to resolve any issues that have arisen to ensure a high quality development. This has resulted in all statutory consultees supporting the application. The site is allocated for residential development in the local plan, and this proposed development would deliver 87 dwellings towards the council's 5-year housing land supply, as well as affordable housing. So the officer recommendation is approval, subject to the conditions outlined in the officer report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have 2 speakers for this particular application. Our first speaker is Councillor Prestige from Bury Parish Council. So if you would like to come and join us, that would be lovely. You have 3 minutes in which to address the committee, and when you're ready, just press the middle button on the microphone.
Middle one. Thank you, Chair. Bury is a village with one of the few made neighbourhood plans in the district, completed by the community with a vision to provide a planning framework and policies that will result in sustainable growth for the local community, ensuring that appropriate infrastructure, services and facilities are provided whilst conserving the village and countryside environment. I would suggest that this gives planners the opportunity to consider the bigger picture of developments in our village. We certainly do. The design of this site does not contribute to the village environment, as it simply reflects the red boxes on the rural exception site, which was imposed by the planners, creating what can only be described as a carbuncle on the edge of the village. Stonewater have very successfully engaged with those who can help it achieve success, and none with anyone who might query their proposals. The parish council and community have been ignored by them, and yet they manage 3 sites in the village, although mismanage Bury Fields, as its neighbours will testify. They have tried to contact the middle-level commissioners. How hard, I wonder, as this development cannot go ahead without their consent, and surely this cannot be assumed, as the planning officer has stated. I mean, obviously the middle-level commissioners have now said something, so the provision of more social housing means that in a few years, a village that was around 440 houses will get over 300 social homes. The demography of occupiers of these homes implies local services, jobs and infrastructure, none of which exist in sufficient quantities. I suspect that these homes will get relief from SIL and therefore will not contribute to local infrastructure. As planners, you have a responsibility to the local community and not just to deliver houses. You must at least be aware of the bigger picture, as I once discussed with Clara. It's not good enough to say no response implies approval. You should be proactive in seeking answers on key issues such as flooding. Bury Brook is already at capacity. And finally, attenuation ponds do not work. There has been barely any water in any ponds in Bury, despite the significant increase in rainfall. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions, so thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Chair.
Our next speaker is Leon Delgate, who is the agent for this particular application. Welcome. You have 3 minutes in which to address the committee, and when you're ready, press the green button.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Also joining me is Nicola Hillier from Stonewater, so we're going to be doing a joint presentation for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Stonewater is an affordable housing provider, and we operate across the UK. We have delivered 173 affordable homes in Huntingdonshire in the last 5 years, with 115 more in our pipeline. Our vision is to provide everyone with an opportunity to have a place to call home. This development proposes a variety of tenures to provide a mixed and balanced community. This will include homes for both affordable and social rent, as well as shared ownership and rent-to-buy options that will offer customers a route to home ownership in the challenging house buying market. This is a model we have delivered successfully across the UK and has been popular in helping customers to stay in the areas they grew up in and where they have family and work connections. The recently completed development next door demonstrated there's a high need for affordable rented housing in the area, and we were unable to accommodate the high levels of demand that we had. Therefore, this site will assist with meeting this recognised need in the area. Stonewater prioritises sustainable development, and all of our new homes are delivered with non-gas heating systems to help our customers run their homes efficiently in an environment of increasing utility costs. We deliver enhanced landscaping to open spaces and include public art installations to give a sense of place and connect the development to the local history and community.
The site benefits from allocation and has outline planning permission, which established the site parameters as detailed on the approved parameters plan. This was used throughout the reserved matters design process to ensure this scheme was in accordance with this pre-established requirement. This scheme was submitted for a pre-application advice inquiry, and the design team worked closely with the planning department, especially the urban design officer, where we developed the initial ideas together, which resulted in the current design layout. More in-depth, these design discussions were carried out throughout the reserved matters application with the department and the UDO, where design influence was requested for feature units and corner turners in the appropriate positions across the site. This results in positive visual focus along the street scene and from key points within the site and wider context. The elevation designs are intended to provide a good balance between the new development to the east of the site, which is under ownership of Stonewater, along with Valiant Square to the west, whilst retaining its own identity. Detailed surveys and reports have been undertaken by the applicant, and it is confirmed by the case officer that all consultees have been satisfied. Thank you for this opportunity to address the members of the DMC and the planning officers.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. Just had to wait for a light to go out. Thank you very much for that. You've obviously heard the concerns from the parish council in there. Is there any particular reason why you didn't feel the need or the necessity to actually engage directly with them, specifically on the change of affordability, which, as we do know, is not a material planning reason, because it's already an outline, but I just wondered whether there was any particular reason why you thought it wasn't worthwhile discussing with them, to give them the opportunity to discuss with you?
It was an oversight due to resourcing issues. We were in discussion with the parish on the adjacent site, and this one came forward sooner than we expected. So it was an oversight initially, but we have been in discussions with them.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? Councillor Niche?
It is different. It's and it could be one for the officers, but I'll ask it here as to have you reinstated the ditch, or has it been reinstated by elsewhere? And if so, who will be the riparian owner of that ditch?
Yes, I can confirm Stonewater have reinstated the ditch, which was significantly overgrown as part of the the Berryfield site, and that sits within our ownership and therefore is our responsibility for the upkeep and maintenance. We have it on the maintenance programme now.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Slade.
Thanks. Yeah, can I ask about the connectivity between the two separate sites? Because I can only see one path that's kind of in the lower end, and you've got this red line that runs across it, which is obviously the boundary that's down for reserve matters. But I'm just wondering about how you're kind of connecting the two sites for residents.
Yeah, so as you say, we've got permeability throughout the site. So obviously, don't have a site plan to point towards, but yeah, there's one to the south, and there's one kind of centrally located on between the two sites, quite close to where the attenuation pond is positioned, and then one further north. And likewise, the intention is to create that connectivity towards Valiant Square as well. So like I say, I think we've got about three access points connecting the site to Valiant Square.
Councillor Slade, you might want to ask that to the planners so that they can show it to you a little bit later. Councillor Corney.
It's actually a follow-on question from that, actually, so it may well come back to the planners, but is that a vehicular access or just pedestrian access?
Yeah, currently it's a pedestrian access. There is the ability to have vehicular access as well, but yeah, there's connectivity that just needs to be resolved in order to create the vehicular access.
Just on that, you're hoping to go for vehicular access, but you won't get that on Valiant Square, though. Is that what am I doing? Because that's a private estate, isn't it? So just a clarification of that. That was all, please.
Yeah, so there's no vehicular access between this new site and Valiant Square now.
Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? No, there are no other questions, so thank you very much for addressing us this evening. Okay. We will move on to questions of clarification. Councillor Corney and Councillor Slade, you might want to have clarification on your questions with the planning officer. Councillor Slade, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, so same question about the connectivity between the two sites. I can see there's kind of a dotted line where the vehicle access is in the centre, potentially, but yeah, a bit more clarification would be useful.
Through you, Chair. So yeah, we're just putting up the plan. So I think, yeah, so the main point here, so the parameter plans show connectivity between this site and Berryfield, which is a rural exception site. Got to note, though, that the allocator site, so the site we're looking at tonight, obviously didn't know that a rural exception site was coming forward, so there's nothing in the allocation about providing those connections. Because the Berryfield site had come forward, it was desirable to then create a more connected, or connect the two developments, but not essential, so we've got to be clear there. So Stonewater, obviously owning both of the application site and the adjacent site, came into an issue where there's a strip of land which is in third-party ownership, almost like a ransom strip of land situation. They've obviously worked hard to try to resolve this, but have been unable to secure kind of connections across. So what the plans show between our site we're looking at tonight and Berryfield is the possibility for future connections. It's not something we can secure here right now, but we've just shown it that hopefully in the future they can be connected. In regards to Valiant Square, we wouldn't be able to get vehicular access through there because they're TPO trees along that boundary. So obviously, yeah, there's a risk to tree protection, tree root areas, etc. So yeah, so they were always going to be pedestrian accesses through, not vehicular access. The idea was to do pedestrian and vehicular to Berryfield, just haven't been able to achieve that. Obviously, we can't hold up an application on that basis, and the way the parameter plan condition is worded, it says if there's justification in terms of when you start to deviate from that parameter plan, then that's something that you need to submit. So they've submitted that evidence that they've done those discussions, obviously just haven't been able to resolve it. So why desirable? Not essential in this case. But I think the thing to take away is that hopefully in the future those connections can be made, and they've been shown on the plans that they may come forward, but it's not something we can secure tonight. Just to touch on, sorry, if I could just touch on the flooding as well. So yeah, so Stonewater's correct in saying that they own the reinstated ditch. So that maintenance has already been secured once on the Berryfield site, and then again going forward on this site, and the lead local flood authority has signed that off. So as part of this application, we've got all those details submitted.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I think I represent the representative from the Parish Council asked about the SIL contribution. Just wondered if we could clarify that, please.
Yeah, so it's not material planning consideration. Obviously, we're SIL charging authority, but that is not a material planning consideration. While it's a SIL chargeable development, if it's affordable housing, it's not something we'd seek to do, but it's not material planning consideration. It's less than 200 homes, so we haven't sought mitigation through financial contributions.
Are there any other questions of clarification on this particular application? There are no other questions, so we will move on to the discussion. Who would like to start the discussion? Councillor Niche, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I think on the bare face of it, it's a fairly straightforward one, but I do have concerns with it. The straightforwardness of it is it's part of our current development plan. It's got outline planning permission. This is just reserve matters. I did have concern on drainage, but that seems to be dealt with and overcome. I do have concerns on having pumping stations because it's down to maintenance and keeping them like that. My other one would be a concern on the fact that if it is all affordable, there will be no SIL, and therefore, there's, as you've quite rightly put out, there's no 106 to look at healthcare provision and education, etc. But on most of it, I think there is very little that I can see from a material planning reasons where we could actually go against it, and it applies to policy. I think in general terms, I do have reservations about a lot of affordable housing in one particular area on a small village, but that's not really material planning reasons, because it could be tenure is not down to us, it's down to whoever builds something as to who they decide to have in it. The advantage, of course, is there will be more affordable housing if that is the case, and that's always got to be a bonus. So on the face of it, I'll listen to others to speak, but I feel we would struggle if that's the way we wanted to refuse it, because I think it should be there for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to contribute to this discussion? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I think Councillor Niche has summarised helpfully on this application, as he underlines. You know, the starting point here is that it would be there would need to be compelling justification for not approving this tonight in the local plan with outline application. I'm certainly not seeing anything that comes remotely close to justification for rejecting it. I think the points Councillor Niche and the Town Council have made about, you know, the importance of mixed and diverse communities are well made, and to the extent that, you know, we can, we always support that, albeit it can be achieved in different ways, and housing associations have had a lot of success doing so. But the point around SIL, as we've been reminded, is not a material consideration, and in any case, there's no automaticity between SIL being levied and SIL being spent in the same place, and we're well below the Section 106 threshold. So I am open to hearing contributions from others, so I didn't see any hands before, but I would be very happy to propose this, Chair, in favour of adopting the recommendation from officers.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wakeford. Councillor Corney.
Thank you, Chair. I have to agree with everything that's been said pretty much so far. I do have reservations regarding the maintenance of the ditch and the flooding. That part of Bury, all of the houses on Brookfield Way, which is the adjoining development, you know, every year the you know, Berrybrook floods, the golf course floods, it comes up their garden, and you know, it depends on the severity of it, how close it gets to the houses. You know, frustratingly, we've been told that, you know, things have been satisfied. We've got to go with that, and I understand that. You know, don't have to agree with things, but we have to go with them, don't we? I think Bury Parish Council have done a phenomenal amount of work on their local plan, and they're certainly one of the more passionate councils when it comes to what happens in their village. And I think it's the fact that it was an oversight that they didn't get consulted about the change there. I think it's a great shame, but unfortunately I can't see anything, you know, strong enough to go against it, and I think, you know, they realise that as well, I'm sure. But it's probably going to feel like they've lost tonight, I'm afraid. But can't go any further than that, really. I'll leave it there.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak? Councillor Brereton.
Thank you, Chair. I concur with everything Councillor Corney said. There is a lot of water in that area in Bury. We shall have to see if their drainage system copes with it. I know it's a very big concern for the council. But as Councillor Corney said, we've been assured it's okay. We'll just see how it goes. Thank you.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's an allocated site. It's been in the plan for quite a long time. My main concern, I think, really is the water being released into the natural drainage system. And I see on the plans or the policies, there's no monitoring of that. I just wonder if we ought to, can we put something in that the so many litres a minute is not overdone or it's adhered to?
Is that something that we can do?
Oh, sorry.
For you, Chair. So I think we just have to be mindful of the wording of the condition, already make sure that they carry it out in accordance with the approved details. I don't think as a local plan authority we can then ask the lead local flood authority who aren't here to then monitor. It's a situation they will monitor through obviously with other statutory bodies, but the conditions there to ensure they do carry it out. There's a maintenance scheme. So I think monitoring is already tied in, just probably not in the sense that you're looking for. But I don't think it'd be reasonable for us to impose that condition at this stage, considering what conditions have already been applied on the outline consent. This condition would be going beyond what we've already conditioned. So yeah, I mean, it's just mindful that we've got to think of all the other developments. Flood risk is always a big issue. We can't be then suggesting that lead local flood authority do some kind of monitoring, and that could have a cost to it and could get into Section 106 territory. So I think just be mindful of what the condition already is on the outline and what it's there to achieve, and it's there to achieve to make sure they implement it in accordance. So if they don't, then that's an enforcement issue, but we can't preempt that.
I don't know, Chairman, whether it's been seconded, is it?
It hasn't yet.
I'll like to second that proposal.
Thank you very much. As we've got a proposal of approval from Councillor Wakeford, and that's been seconded by Councillor Butler, we will have a vote. All those that are in favour of approval of this application, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
And those against?
1,
And those abstaining?
2.
Therefore, that has been approved. We will move on to the next item. The next item on the agenda is 3C. And this is an item in St Neots at 49 St Neots Road, Eaton Ford. And our planning officer, Kevin Simpson, will be providing us with a report.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. Just before I go into the presentation, I just wanted to make you aware, you've been passed some quite late representations this evening. So I'm presenting this on behalf of another officer who's been away from the office, and unbeknown to us when the late representations were issued, something had been sent to her email, so that only just arrived with us quite recently. It's just to let you know that you've seen the late representations. It's just a brief verbal update on those. That there aren't really any new points raised that weren't addressed or considered in the original report. So just some key issues. It references that the Environment Agency didn't make any objections, but they didn't actually make any representations as part of the consultation we carried out, most likely because of the scale of development only being one dwelling. It would be beyond the scope of what they would do. We're aware that it's suggested that it's for the use of a family member, and the requirement for it to be in that location is for family support, but we can't control that by way of a private permission. So whenever that tenure came to an end, we'd have no control over what happened with that property moving forward. There are some references to other developments that have been approved or allowed at appeal, but no specific details have been provided to those. So we weren't able to provide any further clarity on those matters. There was a suggestion that something had been referenced as a means of refusal relating to the access, but I couldn't see that as a reason listed in the officer report. And the matters relating to the design, layout and detailing of the site have been addressed in the report. So it's not considered that any new issues were raised in those late representations in that respect. So I'll just move on to the presentation shortly. Okay, so this application relates to the erection of a bespoke design wheelchair-friendly bungalow and associated ancillary works. It did come to Development Management Committee in November 2023, and it was refused for 5 reasons. Out of those 5 reasons, as detailed in the officer report, 3 of those reasons for refusals are still maintained. So I'll just go through the slides with you. So that's the location of the site. So you can see it in relationship to the number 49 and 47A St Neots Road. And that shows the conservation area with the pink hatching and the relationship to the Grade 2 listed building. That's an existing site plan, so you can see the location plan on the left and the existing site plan on the right. And this that you see before you now is a proposed site plan of the 2023 application that was refused. So if you note the layout on the right-hand screen and the relationship between the boundaries. And this is the proposed layout of this application you're considering this evening. And then the next slide shows both of them set side by side. So you can see the 2023 application on your left and the current application on your right. So the next slide shows the proposed floor plan. So you see we've got a single garage there instead of a double garage now, but that's the general layout of the property. And that shows the south and west elevation of the site. So that was of the refused application, showing the front elevation. And then the next one shows the revised scheme that you see before you this evening. And that shows the two together. So I just placed the view from the St Neots Road so you'd see what it would look like from the street scene. So that's the differences between the two there. And those are the remaining elevations for you. And a general roof plan. So just moving on to some photographs of the general surroundings. So that shows the boundary with number 47A St Neots Road. And a general view into the site. And that's views east into the site, so you can see the Orchard Road properties over the boundary there. So that's the garden area of number 49 St Neots Road, which was to the right of the application site. And then that's the side elevation and garden area of 49 St Neots Road. That shows the access onto St Neots Road with the side elevations of 47A and 49 visible. And then a view from the south, so you can see the current space there is between the properties and undeveloped site beyond it. And then a wider view from the south, so you can see the general layouts. And view southwest onto St Neots Road, and then northeast. So, as I said, there are 3 reasons for objections that are retained. So one of them, as detailed within the officer report, paragraph 7.59 to 7.63, relate to design, layout and general amenity issues to the neighbouring properties. And then heritage concerns, paragraph 7.48 to 7.56, consider the impacts on heritage assets and the objection from the conservation officer. And the reason for rejection relating to flooding is the site does lie within flood zone 2. So the details relating to that are set out within section 7.3 to 7.30 of the officer report. I think the differences with this application is that the sequential test was provided, but we don't consider that the application has passed the sequential test because it didn't consider sites that would be suitable for one dwelling across the whole district. It just considered sites that were shown in the strategic housing land availability assessment, which were sites that were not covering the whole district, so sites earmarked for development or potentially able for development. So it only focused on them when carrying out the sequential test. So the view of the local planning authority remains that the sequential test hasn't been passed for a single dwelling in flood zone 2. Thank you.
Before we move on, can I just ask, has everyone been able to see the extra late rep that came out today? Has everyone been able to read that? Okay. So in that case, we will move on to our speakers. We have one speaker on this particular application today, and that's the agent Simon Richardson. Welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening. You have 3 minutes in which to address the committee.
Good evening, Chair, and good evening, everyone else. Thank you, Kevin, for that update. As you saw, I mean, you know, there were circumstances why it couldn't have gone with the general late reps, and that's appreciated. But you know, I appreciate the best has been done. I would just like to pick up on a couple of points, though. So rather than sort of speculate, just to provide a bit of detail. So if we were able to look at one of the site plans for the area. They pull up that there have been 5 recent bungalow approvals adjacent to the site, although one of them is not yet built, so 4 show on the plan. The context of that is that the first application for those, the Environment Agency raised an objection because then, you know, the mapping and the HDC SFRA said it's in the flood zone. However, that's large-scale assumptions based on levels, etc. And on each of those applications, flood risk assessment and actual measuring of levels rather than guessing showed that the sites were suitable for housing, and 5 bungalows were approved by HDC in the last few years with no objections and, you know, and not just no representations, but consent or recommendation of approval from the Environment Agency. So I would posit that the Environment Agency not raising an objection to the 6th bungalow in that area is perhaps more a reflection that they've accepted that, as in this case where there is a flood risk assessment which identifies that there is appropriate levels within the site and no flood risk, that's the reason for that. I appreciate we're getting, we've got 3 reasons to address, and I'm rattling through in time. In terms of the sequential test, you know, because of the circumstances in this instance and the bespoke design nature of the property, you know, even if HDC kept records of individual plots, you know, a site in Bury or Ramsey or, you know, somewhere else is not going to be appropriate. What we have here is an applicant who's currently living in a large family home in the town and wants to remain where close family can provide close support and comfort. I think the only other issue to pick up on the update, it wasn't a question about the access to the site. There had been previously, and I think it's still within the suggested reason for refusal, reference to a right of way, although the report actually does also say that a private right of way is not a reason for refusal. Just for the record again, it is not a public right of way. It is not on a definitive map. It's not recorded as a charge against any of the properties. I think it's just more a case of it's always happened, but provision has been allowed for its retention within the scheme. Conscious that time is ticking on, happy to answer any questions. From a neighbour impact perspective, the design now is of a scale and height which, if we wanted to be clever, we could probably have put it through as a permitted development Class E outbuilding, told a fib, said it was a studio or a home gym, and then moved Grandad in there. But you know, we're being open and upfront. And very, very briefly, with regards to the relationship with the White House, there isn't one. There is no view from one site to the other, and there is no view with both the site and the listed building in it. So, conscious I've transgressed my 3 minutes, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions of clarification. Thank you for joining us. We will move on to questions of clarification for our planning officer. Are there any councillors that wish to ask for any clarification? Councillor Niche.
It's just a comment, actually. I only picked it up today, which if I picked up earlier, I would have mentioned on page 78, 7.5. There's a typo. It said the planning committee meeting that is met on the 20th of November 2024. It's just a typo. I just thought, just in case it creates issues further down the line.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of clarification? Councillor Sanderson?
I was just going to say thank you, Kevin, for clarifying the issue with the flood risk assessment. So it hasn't been applied correctly. That's the problem here? You said that it's not that there hasn't been one; it just hasn't been done correctly. Is that the understanding?
So yes, in terms of sequential tests, planning practice guidance is very clear that the applicant should engage with local planning authority to agree the site search area. Obviously, the site search areas we've put forward would be Huntingdon District in its total, not just a small area. This is because it's for one private dwelling. Obviously, we don't look at personalised consents because we can't control future occupiers for a private dwelling.
Thank you. Councillor McAdam.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if you'd like to just comment regarding the proximity to the listed building. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just getting to the relevant section of the report. Bear with me. Okay, so the listed building wasn't actually specifically referenced in the reason for refusal. I think from memory it was roughly about 80 metres away. So the plan that I showed you at the beginning was just to show it in context with the listed building, but it does sit within the conservation area. So the reason for refusal mainly related to the fact the objection from conservation officers is that it would infill a historic landscape and be an obvious contrast to the historic back of pavement development and would result in loss of views through the site, closing off the historic right-of-way between the terraces, and would represent overdevelopment of the plot, further compromising green space and failing to respect existing views, street patterns and the historic building lines. So they felt it was contrary to policy LP34 of the local plan and the various objectives of the Nears Neighbourhood Plan and the National Planning Policy Framework, as well as the Planning Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act. So I think it'd be cast your mind back to the photograph I showed you, showing the space between the two plots and what the general arrangement of development is like there. And that would represent quite a large building, albeit single storey, which would almost fully enclose that gap and be quite a modern structure in what is a traditional setting through those properties. Thank you.
Are there any questions of clarification for our planning officer? There are no other questions, so we will move on to the discussion. Who would like to start our discussion? Councillor Sanderson, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This came to us in November, as we were informed earlier, and yes, there have been some changes here, and I understand the agent and applicant's frustration, but I think really what's outlined on page 74 from paragraph 7.27, I think, and as Kevin said and Lewis in their presentations, it's clear why we can't approve this, mainly for the flooding reasons. And the sequential test is there for a reason, isn't it? And I think it's very clearly set out. And yes, I have sympathy. I mean, we mentioned the Equality Act at 7.32. And there is an authority who want to help out in these situations, but as it stands, I don't think we can approve the application.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I concur with Councillor Sanderson's take on this. I think we can have significant sympathy with the particular circumstances that have clearly motivated the application and the application here, and as Councillor Sanderson rightly draws our attention to, we absolutely have due regard to our Equality Act duties in reflecting on this, but the sequential test does need to be followed. It needs to be followed because that's part of the process that we've adopted as a council, and it's reflected in law, but also it exists for an important reason, which is that we take flooding issues extremely seriously. We all know and have discussed at this committee in other contexts before how seriously flooding can impact homes and communities, and we consider it very seriously when we consider planning applications. So I really do think our hands are tied here, and I note Councillor Sanderson didn't formally make a proposal. If he wanted to make one, I'd second it, or otherwise, Chair, I'm happy to propose adopting the officer recommendation.
Okay, lovely. Is there anyone else that wish to contribute? Councillor Niche.
I'll come through you, Chair, as opposed to just jumping in. I think all the issues there are quite right, and it's also put in there's heritage issues as well. But I would like to say, as I always mention at any place where the parish or town councils can't be bothered to attend, I think is also quite worrying in their understanding of planning as well, because when you read through some of this, they've already had the one previously, which they could have looked at and said, yeah, we can follow that. But no, they've gone off and they've done some willy-nilly sort of stuff on why they're refusing it. That aside, I think the reasons that the officers put through quite correctly are there, as well as the flooding one. So I would have seconded it, but I was jumped in by the planning portfolio holder. So that'll be all. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a proposal of refusal from Councillor Wakeford and seconded by Councillor Sanderson, and also would have been by Councillor Niche, but we'll go with Councillor Sanderson. All those that are in favour of refusal, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Therefore, that has been refused. We'll just wait for our other members to join before we move on. Welcome back, councillors. We will move on to item 3D on the agenda, which is a planning application for 29 Acacia Avenue in St Ives. And that's being presented to us by our planning officer, Kevin Simpson.
Thank you, Chair. This is item 3D, which is pages 101 to 117 of the reports pack, and relates to a change of use of land adjacent to 29 Acacia Avenue and the retention of an existing boundary fence. This is presented at Development Management Committee because the officer recommendation of approval differs from that of the Town Council of refusal. So this is a revised application following a refusal of an earlier application in 2020, which I will show you an example of in the slides. So it's not within a conservation area. There are no listed buildings or protected trees in the immediate vicinity, and it also lies within flood zone 1. So just taking you through the slides, shows you a general location of the site in the grey hatching there, and no constraints surrounding it. That's an aerial view of the land in question next to the properties. So this shows, the next slide shows the plan with the area of land highlighted and the plans for the fencing existing and proposed. So you'll note that the proposed have got soft landscaping in front of them, which was a request from previous correspondence with officers and welcomed by our urban design team. So next slide, please. So that's a general landscaping plan showing the arrangement of hedging. Just to note, that section there at the bottom left of the screen on that angle If you just go there, Julie, for me, please, thank you. There isn't, as you'll see on the site photographs, any hedging there at present, but I have had a conversation with the applicant regarding that, and they were waiting for the outcome of the application. So in the event that members are minded to approve it, we will condition that that is implemented along with the soft landscaping that's already there. So the next slides just show some general views of the site prior to development. Key point here is this appears to be an area of land that nobody appeared to maintain. The applicant has taken steps to try and find out who the owner of the land is. They've consulted with HDC, the Town Council, they've taken out a press notice, and they've served the correct certification as a part of the development to say that the land doesn't appear to have any ownership determined. So that shows the refused application. So you can see we've got quite a large closed board fence quite close to the boundary line there. So that's a view of the site from the southwest, the application site to the right of it. The next slide, that just shows a wider view so you can see the relationship of the fence as it was that time next to the highway, and a view from the northwest of the refused application and the limited scope for soft landscaping to be included. So this is the revised scheme. So that shows the fence is now substantially set back. We've got quite a large area of green space retained, which although it will form part of the residential curtilage, we will put conditions on there, which I'll come on to in the future. The section of land where the soft landscaping is omitted, but will be conditioned in the event of an approval. The next slide, please. It's just a wider view showing the relationship now with the street scene and the availability of being able to put planting there. And then a closer view showing the hedging that's already been established there. And then just a further general view of it. And again, just seeing then you've note next to 27 Acacia Avenue, we've got the design where it's lowering in height as it approaches the highway. So this is just an example of some other close boarded fence in the area. One of the comments we received was that it wasn't a familiar feature. This isn't far from the application site. It's either side of Shakespeare Road. And the next slide just shows the relationship, the opposite side of the junction. Again, you've got close board fencing with soft landscaping in front of it. The recommendation is one of approval. So we'd impose a time limit to implement the soft landscaping that hasn't been included. There'd be a condition on there to say it needed to be retained in accordance with the plans that have been submitted, along with the materials, the provision and the maintenance and retention of the soft landscaping. And we would also look to limit permitted development rights to ensure that no other boundary treatments or outbuildings could be placed on that section of land without prior consultation with the local planning authority. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sadly, we don't have anyone from the parish council or the town council. However, we do have one speaker, and that speaker is the applicant, Mr. Ali. Welcome and thank you for joining us, and you have 3 minutes in which to address the committee.
Cheers, thank you very much. So the land adjacent to 29 Acacia Avenue measures about 80 square metres. It was formerly unmaintained, subject to dumping, littering, prior to and during the early stages of my occupation. I've taken it upon myself to clear, seed, introduce new planting and continually maintain to date. Also with obviously a slight offset with the boundary fence. That's obviously something that's happened due to the initial application where we've stepped the fence back, just trying to be sustainable and maintain as much of the existing fence as possible. The introduction of hedging and planting has increased the linear meterage by 500% when compared to its pre-existing condition, demonstrating net gain in amenity, biodiversity and ecological value as well. It has a positive impact on the character on the surrounding area and providing significant compensation for a small loss. Scheme's been recommended for approval by the officer. Highways, they said there's no issues either. We've demonstrated a numerous number of policies in the application, and I think that's it really.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of clarification for this particular speaker? There are no questions. Thank you ever so much for joining us this evening. Therefore, we'll move on to the next section, which is, are there any questions of clarification from our planning officer? If there are no questions, we will move on to the discussion, and Councillor Niche has his hand up. Oh, I'll come back to you, Councillor Clark, if that's okay. Oh, right, okay. Sorry, Councillor Clark.
Yes. What happens if a bona fide owner comes forward in the future?
Thank you, Councillor. So land ownership isn't a factor that we can take into account in terms of deciding a planning application. So that's something that the applicant would have to address as a civil matter. So as long as somebody has, in a case where they don't know who the owner is, taken steps to try and establish that and submitted the correct certification at the point of application, which this person's done, that's all we really look for in planning terms. It's not something we can decide a planning application on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. Are there any other questions of clarification? There are no other questions, so I will go on to the discussion. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. And just for continuity, can I express my deep concerns, as you did, of the lack of the parish and town council in this case, as I did previously with St Neots. But on the face of it, on looking at this one, my personal view is it's fairly straightforward. I think we've put good conditions in it. It's much improved on the last one, which I don't recall, but so many go through. And therefore, looking through all, loss of green space, well, actually, I think that, there's plenty around that area. So I'm quite happy, Chair, to propose acceptance and approve in accordance with the officer's recommendations and the conditions put in place.
Thank you very much. Councillor Goulson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm one normally that would fight against loss of green space, but when green space is basically abandoned space and it becomes an eyesore, on this case, there is a bit of loss, but I think it's been mitigated by how Mr. Ali has developed it and made it a lot better for the community. Listened to the officers, and as Councillor Niche says, has put in the recommendations and conditions that will actually make this a far better area than what was.
Councillor McAdam.
Thank you very much, Chair. I very much agree with Councillor Goulson. Councillor Sanderson and I went and actually visited the site this morning and had a look, and I've got to say I actually found it quite attractive, and looking at the photograph of what it was like with the really looking like a very rough area of land, unmaintained. I think this is a distinct improvement, and so I'm happy to second the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. If we don't have any other councillors wishing to speak, we will move on to the vote. We have a recommendation of approval from Councillor Niche, which has been seconded by Councillor McAdams. All those in favour of approval, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13.
So that is unanimous, so that has been approved. We will now move on to item 4 on our agenda, which is appeal decisions, which our planning service manager will report to us.
Thank you, Chair. Another busy month. We have 5 appeals this month. If I could draw members' attention to the first appeal on the list, which is 16 Cox Close, Road, Yaxley, which is an appeal that was dismissed. This application had a cost application against it with regards refusing to take amendments on the application. The inspector ruled that the fact that the council had advertised its amendments policy clearly on the website, it determined that costs were not appropriate in this case. So it's one of the first tests of the no amendments policy. We are looking to amend the amendments policy going forward, but this is quite interesting to note that the inspector's view in relation to taking amendments on applications. The next application I just want to draw members' attention to was an allowed appeal, which was for Offord Clooney, Offord Darcy, for the construction of a warehouse. This application was refused on highway grounds. The applicant submitted additional highways information which satisfied the concerns of the LPA. Subsequently, the application was allowed on appeal. That was additional information coming in later. And if I can just draw members' attention to the last one, which was an 18 application, which was for Somersham, which was a change of use to provide 4 additional travellers' pitches. The reason I bring this to members' attention is that you will be seeing further applications for traveller sites coming forward in the next couple of months. This one was actually allowed on appeal subject to a temporary planning permission for a period of 5 years on the basis of the flood risk and to allow the council to complete its needs assessment. In all cases, the cost applications were submitted in these appeals, and in all cases, the applications were lost. So therefore, we won in relation to no costs. Thank you, Chair. Any question?
Thank you very much. Are there any questions about that? No. That brings us to the end of our meeting. So I'd like to thank everybody for their contributions, and thanks to our planning officers who put so much hard work into getting these reports for us. Therefore, I declare this meeting closed.